Welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast. My name is DJ Chuang. I'm joined here with Bobby Deng, who recently moved from Austin, Texas to the Los Angeles area. He's going to live the nomadic life for a bit because he does remote work, which is pretty awesome.
Yes.
And we were first connected through our both volunteer work at Asian Mental Health Collective, which is a non-faith organization that's been a huge champion for Asian American mental health. Most notably, over 61,000 members on their Facebook group, for which I'm a moderator. I'm also a board member of Asian Mental Health Collective. Bobby does a number of roles. We'll chat a little bit about that. But where we're going to go with this conversation is also how our faith as Christians has made a difference in our own mental health journey. So Bobby, welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast.
Thank you.
So glad to meet you in person.
Finally.
And we're having a coffee chat in person as we meet for the first time.
Yes, we're literally having coffee right now.
Yes.
This nice 7 Seas cold brew that's been amazing this morning, and I'm here on your terrace of this with amazing view of California, Saddleback Ridge, right?
Yes.
It's been absolutely stunning. This is the quintessential cozy California mountain view life of sorts. So thanks for having me. Yeah.
Well, thank you. My wife's an artist, so she wanted a beautiful scenery where we lived, and this is one of the few places where you get to live and not look into someone's garage or the street or someone's wall. So we're blessed to have this for a few years while we're here. Living costs are very high, and both of us are freelancers, so our budget's tight, and so we'll see where God might move us next.
Totally.
But we're grateful to be here and share the view with friends and guests that come along the way. But Bobby and I, we've corresponded over email and Slack for a number of months, and we discovered that we're people of faith working in a non-faith organization, so that's always a aha moment. And it's nice to have someone on this side of the aisle.
Yep. That's the aisle. It's funny. So it's almost at work. It's like, oh, you're a Christian? You're a Christian also? It's like a little secret, right? We have to be whisper about it a little bit. I think it's funny, at least in California. I work in tech. I work at Meta or Facebook. And I think just general in the tech industry, at least in the NorCal Bay Area, it's challenging to come out as a Christian because it's so stigmatized by what mainstream media has portrayed Christianity to be, which I think is not fully true. And there are certain things that have happened that have caused that. So I'm also aware of that. So it's like a tightrope to kind of, to balance, right? I think we also have to even balance how we share our faith, because I think we're called to the Great Commission, but I think just being overt about our faith at times can be construed as toxic in certain contexts.
Right.
So it's being aware of that and trying to pick your spots and trying to find good ways to enter the conversation. So the funny thing is, actually at work and in the tech space, it's a lot more easy. It's 10 times easier to have a mental health conversation than to have a faith conversation. It's very easy to open up with I had a mental health experience and journey. I experienced depression, anxiety in the past, and then I found some healing through that, and then now I'm here championing, advocacy in the ways for other people to kind of find their own sense of healing or transformation. Yeah.
Yes. It's funny, here we are talking about erasing shame, and yet our faith becomes an element of shame in some context, and yet it is also a part of our healing journey. So
for sure,
in my own mental health journey, I could use all the help I get, so faith has certainly been helpful. So I've incorporated a lot of the healing pathways that I think our spirituality provides, but yet at the same time, I cannot just publicly, freely talk about my faith that has been so helpful. Because at the same time, just like pharmaceuticals, I finally found an analogy that was helpful. And most people agree, or many people agree on both sides of the faith spectrum, is that just like pharmaceuticals are helpful to a lot of people but have side effects for some, faith is helpful for many but perhaps harmful or toxic for some. And so that gives us a framework to realize, okay, well, don't take it away from everybody.
Correct.
When it can help many people. But one of the things I Well, one of the things many things, but one of the things I wanted to learn is just what happens on the volunteer side of
Sure.
AMHC, because as a board member, I kind of get an overview,
Yeah.
but I don't know all the programs that we're running besides the Subtle Asian Mental Health, which is the Facebook group.
Yeah.
There's also marketing, there's also research, and a couple other programs. Which ones are you involved in?
Yeah, I'm more involved in the marketing and the research side. So I first start off in the research side. I think trying to bring a market research perspective onto it, which is basically like building quick insights on the human front so that we can create content with it. I think it's evolved a little bit more to academic research and trying to get research published. And it's also helpful for us to do grant writing. I think that's what it's evolved into. And then on the marketing front, it's kind of where my background is. I think, long story short, I spent some time in advertising, doing analytics and data science, I guess. And my day job is a data scientist at social media company Meta. So I think I oversee a lot of the big picture strategy and also the day-to-day, week-to-week, more so the week-to-week, month-to-month sort of execution of content, right? As a volunteer, I don't have the full capacity to do a daily output of content. But I think at first, missionally, we're trying to just promote resources, just to simply disseminate information. The layer on top of that, I think we want to also interject and create awareness, education, and also then eventually get into the conversation, trying to interject. And what that's looked like, I think in the pinnacle, it's like creating empathy and healing spaces and holding space for people when there's like mass shootings. I think with the Monterey shootings, Half-Moon shootings, I just remember that weekend, it was just like putting out statements and then organizing, coordinating resources, provide for people, right? Creating empathy for that. So yeah, I think that's like the big picture, I think, of what we want to do. And taking a step back, I think AMHC has definitely evolved a lot. So I think in the simplest, we're trying to destigmatize mental health in Asian diaspora communities to start. But this is slightly more of a personal slant to this, which is I think we're also trying to get people started on their mental health journey and encourage them along the way. And that's my personal mission and passion, I think, having gone through my own journey. And I think from an executional perspective, we are known for just basically giving out a lot of therapy, right? I think we have a Lotus Therapy Fund in which we just pay for therapy, 8 sessions for people that apply. Yes. Which has been great. So we partner with a startup called Orchid that does that. We also have community support groups that are free, therapy volunteers, all over Zoom, so it's also available as well, holding space. And additionally, we even have Subtle Asian Mental Health, which is the Facebook group that you've been moderating for, right? 60K members, and that was pivotal for me. That was my gateway into MHC, where it was jumping on the trends of like Subtle Asian traits. Yes. But then, this is the polar opposite of what social media has appeared to be. Social media has historically been like show the best parts of yourself, but it's a very skewed, like this just the best parts, and not like the real behind the scenes challenging things. But this group, holding privacy and also protecting people's vulnerability, like it creates a very safe space for you to share all the behind closed doors challenges, right? You see a lot of themes of like dealing with parents, grades, performance, job searching, dating, all that stuff, all the big life transition challenges, I guess, as well. So, so I think that was powerful for me, and I've used it before. I've posted certain things I was going through, and it's just overwhelming to see, I think, the flood of empathy through the comments, people showing support for you. I think that just means a lot on a human front. So I think that's what we're trying to do, just provide healing and space for people to like process and then also start the mental health journey and kind of go deeper. So yes. Well, what attracted me to Asian Mental Health Collective, and when I was invited to be a board member, was I've been following and participating a little bit in the Facebook group, was just the amazing vulnerability and empathy that was cultivated in a Facebook group with total strangers. And that's been one of my hopes in my own journey of dealing with mental struggles for 23 years now.
And so to see a space like that happen on a Facebook group was so powerful and poignant. And I know as an organization overall, definitely huge on advocacy, just opening that conversation up, and also providing the largest Asian American therapist directory in the US as well as Canada. The Therapy Fund makes it affordable for those that don't have finances. And we're very grateful for corporate sponsors that help us make that possible. And then as we're recording this, we're coming up on the 3rd annual Transformation Online Conference. And the theme this year will be about managing our mental wellness in the digital landscape. And so just want to mention that as a timely reminder of another thing that AMHC does to serve the Asian American diaspora around the world. So tune into that. The link will be in the show notes. May 6th, right? Okay, May 6th, 2023. Now, you mentioned your own personal journey. When did you first realize that you needed help? And then second, when did you decide to go public with your story?
Yeah.
I think those are two. I mean, though they were two pivotal marks for me, you may add a third or fourth if you have some.
For sure. No, I love telling this story, yeah. So I spent the first 4 years of my post-undergrad, adult life in New York City. So there's a lot of stigma associated with New York City. I worked in advertising, and the work culture there just is pretty intense. I think that whole city changed me a little bit. The environment made me want certain things that I didn't necessarily naturally want as a kid growing up. And so basically, going to the big city, I started chasing fame, more like notoriety and like prestige, popularity, whatever the case is. And I think I had a really strong relationship with achievement when it came to work. As it's part of my identity. I think as Asians, we struggle with this a lot, right? Performance-driven worth. So I think I remember I first made this one big gaffe at work. Like I messed up on a project, but it was basically I was trying to do something that I wasn't hired to do because we were short-staffed. So it wasn't like core to my skill set. It's just that I let the team down. I felt really bad, and that shattered my self-image of this like rock star, high-performing, person. So that was really difficult. I just could not look myself in the mirror. I developed severe social anxiety where I was constantly late to meetings with people. I couldn't look people in the eye for the fear of like them seeing me exposed. Yeah, I just like detested myself. So that was really difficult. And that's my first valley into depression. I just remember waking up and just like experiencing all this physical symptoms of depression, like taking forever to get up and like not having any sort of motivation, not looking forward to anything in life type thing. That's when I realized I needed help. I remember so my first part of my journey starts with talk to all my friends what I'm struggling with, but just hearing, and then just getting a lot of well-intentioned but unhelpful advice of like, dude, just suck it up, or like, dude, just work, just solve this problem, right? Which I don't. But I think it's obviously super well-intentioned, but it doesn't really hit the spot. I think there's a whole misalignment of how I viewed myself and like my self-worth there that I didn't have space and time to be able to process and change. So I first started at Redeemer Counseling. It was probably slightly more biblical counseling, as we just talked about. So that's more like bringing like biblical truth into how you process your thoughts. I think it's well-intentioned, but for me, can feel invalidating to what I was going through and feelings. So it wasn't as helpful. So I didn't have the greatest experience of therapy there, but I will say it was amazing to have space for me to just vent and unload. I felt better every single time I went there, but then there's still a deeper underlying problem. So ultimately, I thought that, as I mentioned before, that it was the environment. So I wanted to leave New York to get out of this place that kind of made me want to chase like high performance. Funny enough, I went to San Francisco afterwards. I thought California in general was like the beach burrito vibes, where you just like go on a beach and just chill and like not worry about life, and people don't judge you for what you do. But then San Francisco is the polar opposite of that. I think I missed the mark, and that's actually what SoCal is.
Yes. Parts of SoCal.
Parts of SoCal.
By the beach.
By the beach.
Not in the city. So San Francisco is not known for beach culture. So.
No, you have to drive a little bit. So basically, fast forward a little bit, I went through even more valleys of depression there. I think it was just brutal. Trying to break into tech from advertising, not having the technical skills, getting brutally rejected in a lot of interviews. That really decimated my sense of self-worth, if I'm super honest with you. I was just like so terrified. I had so much anxiety when it came to like, hey, do you want to apply for this role? Like, oh, no, I don't want to get rejected and like get destroyed. That's how I felt, honestly. So I think with that, I just experienced more valleys, ups and downs. I think, and that's when I started. I took some medication. I remember being on Buspar, a very like low intensity medication to start, and I did a bunch of therapy as well. I found some affordable, low income sort of therapy options as I was in grad school for that time too. So, and that's when I first experienced like true therapy. Even basic CBT like did wonders for me. CBT is basically all the like cognitive distortions or the biases, faulty biases in our thinking. It can be summarized in 10 pages, but that 10 pages or 10 minutes, it could like change your life. Like if I could like recommend anything to somebody, it's like start with the CBT. Like what are the different ways that we faultily think about?
And spell out CBT for us.
Oh yeah, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's like the basic, like the Big Mac of therapy. Not to bring this into a McDonald's analogy, but it's like a starter. You know, it's like a starter sandwich. I would recommend people on.
Yes.
Right. So I had a lot of therapy wins. I think I struggle with a lot of comparison. Right. I think a lot of people struggle with the comparison in general. It's
But there's a certain Asian American flavor to it that intensifies it.
Oh yeah.
It's like umami.
Okay. I think this keep it short and summarize it a little bit. It's like a cognitive behavioral therapy helped me to understand why I compared, and then like it helped me lean into the root reason of that, which is like I just don't know where I was going with my life, and I don't know how fast to pace myself, which is why I compared. So with that, I started to find my own journey and find my own sense of direction, and that was really helpful for me to just kind of move forward in life and realize, you know, if I'm going in this direction, it doesn't compare to what other people are doing with their lives. So it helps a little bit.
Good.
It's good direction. And then I think other therapy wins is like confronting close ones in love. I think as a very somewhat conflict avoidant person in the past, a very like somewhat people pleasing with people pleasing tendencies. It was hard for me to like resolve conflict directly because it was just so uncomfortable and abrasive. But I've realized I can look at it from hey, there's some problems or there's some beef between us, but I want to talk about it because I want a better relationship with you. So as I come to them and say, I care about you enough that I want to resolve this so that we can go back to just, you know, our happy relationship, right? So there's that. And then even more recently, my mental health journey, there's something called rational emotive behavioral therapy, REBT. And that's basically like a lot of our anxieties that we feel right now are the cause of an irrational belief. I think when we logically think about it, which is something I've learned, we think about things that are very rational, and then the emotional layer, you can acknowledge both. On the emotional layer, we have all these irrational thoughts. I think logically, like, this is stupid. Nobody's going to like believe this, but we still feel it. It's an example would be like, oh, you know, with the fear of the meta layoffs, it's like I kind of fear that if I have a gap in my resume, that nobody's going to want me or like me as a single person, or like my friends will fall away from me. But then I started realizing, wait, this is irrational because the friends that really care about me, that are my authentic, genuine friends, wouldn't just ditch me because of this. They'd be ditching what I would offer them as a person that worked here and the association with that. So that's not my authentic, genuine self in some sense. So to be able to talk it out and bring it to the light kind of helps dispel a lot of this irrational belief, which causes our anxiety at times. So yeah, that's kind of my journey when I first started and where I am now. I think timeline-wise, to give you the timeline, it was like 2014 was my first, you know, social anxiety panic attack as well. That's when it first started, and then started therapy that year, or counseling that year, and then it was like, and then moved in 2015, 2016, 2017. That's kind of when I started therapy again, medication, and then I've been kind of actually keeping a therapist with me through all the highs and lows, even the steady states too. I think it's always valuable to have another perspective. And I think I guess I started publicly talking about mental health probably last year or 2 years ago, so 2011, 2022. Sorry, 2021 or 2022. That's when I started a blog post. That's when I started like my own mental health podcast, which is Ramen Bros, which is like Asian masculinity and mental health. So that's when I started putting my story out more confidently. But that whole thing is I needed to like feel really secure in myself to put myself out vulnerably. I think I was just sitting on a treasure trove of experiences that can really benefit people. I'm trying to model and demonstrate what a transformed mind looks like when you go through a lot of therapy. You're able to process and be deeply aware of your thoughts and your feelings. So, so that's kind of the impetus for me to like put myself out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking that step of faith and courage to do that. And I found that as I share my mental health journey and struggles, it's helped other people to open up and to acknowledge that, hey, they're not alone, and here's someone that I can talk to about these crazy thoughts and feelings that are going on in my head. Nobody could understand, but at least someone had something similar that looks like me could maybe understand and guide me to resources. And I want to put a little caveat here that even as someone goes through their mental health journey and recovery and treatment process, they don't have to go public, and they don't have to start a podcast like you and I have done. But that was one of the things that I wrestled through as I was going through my recovery is, does this mean I have to become a speaker and share my testimony and all this? And then again, set up all these unnecessary, unrealistic expectations that again overwhelm me and buries me again into my emotional shame. And so I wanted to say that here.
For sure.
And secondly, we'll add a link in the show notes to your blog post when you came out. And I could tell from your wording there that it was a very emotional moment for you to go public.
Yes.
And then a link to your podcast, Ramen Brothers, as well.
Thank
so
you.
that'll be in the show notes at erasingshame.com.
Love it.
So as you share your personal story of struggling with mental health challenges and your podcast, you haven't talked about the faith element. And so here is your invitation to talk about the faith element. You mentioned in the past when you went to this Christian counseling center that was more biblical based and not so much psychological.
Yeah.
And you found much more helpful to use some of the psychological tools in your healing journey. Where does that put you now in terms of pulling together how you live out your faith and your mental health wellness?
That's a really good question. I have a couple of thoughts.
It's probably still in process, but
for sure.
We're checking in today. It happens to be Holy Saturday as we're recording this. It won't be released until end of April, just so our listeners and viewers have a time reference.
Sure. So where does faith intersect with my mental health journey, basically, right? So I think I've kind of showcased how mental health has done a great job cleaning out the gunk in my heart and my life, right? It's helped me clear out all the faulty ways of thinking and looking at things, the biases, right? So it's kind of like the analogy of cleaning out your engine, but I think you ultimately still need oil for the engine to run. So there's a couple of things that faith, from a big picture and a practical level, answer that I don't think mental health can easily provide, right? One is a sense of purpose, calling, right? So I think hope as well. Purpose, calling, hope. I think the gospel does a great job of, one, giving us the idea of heaven, a deeper long-term security of a macro sense, but then also like to live a fulfilled life. I think for me, I remember during a retreat, I was praying, God, why'd you put me through so many valleys of depression? And then he answered me quietly. It was like, so that you can experience the depth of my joys. So I think for me, one of my core values in life is a sense of joy, right? I think it's kind of nebulous, but simply put, it's like it's something that gets me out of the bed, which helps me fight the whole I want to stay in bed for like half an hour to an hour and just mope away. So with that, I think I've found a sense of like there's just like things in my life that I've kind of I can control, which is like picking, choosing hobbies, people, relationships, experiences that I want to experience. And then secondarily, my secondary core value is intimacy. So even like with vulnerability, intimacy, that's why I'm very like wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very open with people, and I can go there with people. That gives me a sense of joy. That helps me feel really satisfied and fulfilled. I think fulfilled is a very good word in between content, which is very difficult, and then happy, which is somewhat like getting what you want. But I think also happiness for me is more construed as like controlling what you can control. So yeah, it helps me feel a sense of fulfillment. So big picture, it's really helpful there. I think from a sense of worth, here's the thing, right? From a performance-based worth perspective, we typically feel like we need to earn our worth. We need to get A's, we need to get titles, we need to accrue like money, we need to get dated, we need to date, get married, whatever, to show our sense of worth, right? That's exhausting. We also know biblically it's that like our sense of worth comes from our identity from God, which is a little bit cliche. That's the logical layer. But I think practically the Bible is like it's because God loved us first and chose us, and that signals our worth at what He sees in us. And it's like who we are as children of God, we're loved not, and I think He attributes worth by what He says and how He treats us, which is really powerful in receiving that. But it's also that sense it's to help us to shed this performance-based worth. Like our worth is not dependent on ourselves. I think practically on the day-to-day with people, you still need to like do things. You still need to like be motivated. But at the core longing, I think it's God has created us, and God gives us gifts. He knows the number of hairs on our head.
Yes.
And that gives us an inherent sense of worth that cannot be taken away. I remember in therapy, somebody asked me like, "Oh, would you say a newborn baby has worth?" Like, "Oh yeah, of course, tons of worth, so much potential." So would you say you have worth? This is the context of me getting brutally rejected by like interviews. Like, no, I feel so worthless because I got so rejected. I feel so useless. But that's a clear indication of like, yeah, my worth is very based on like achievement, whereas your worth is based like your childlike innocence in relation to God, right? So that's what that's trying to do. That's a paradigm shift that's really hard to like keep on, but that's really powerful, right?
Yes.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is community. Faith has provided a really unique sense of community that I think I dare to say that non-Christian circles have tried to imitate. I remember going to something called Salon, which is like a Bible study group for non-Christian people. It's supposed to be modeling a weekly, like, let's hang out and let's build friends, relationships. I remember all the intro starter questions that they do for icebreakers are the fun, like, oh, so what was your funny high school experience, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting, but we do all that stuff too, but we just have we have a deeper connection to like Jesus and what Christ has done for us, right? That keeps us together. I think I'm very grateful to have experienced a deep sense of community, both in my San Francisco, California circles in church, Radiance, shout out to Radiance, and also Austin Stone back in Austin. So it's funny that I now think about family is not your blood ties, but it's the people that you bleed for, that you would bleed for. And I have people there that I would bleed for, and I know that they would bleed for me. So it sounds a little bit gruesome in the light of Easter, but you know. So yeah, I think community provides not only the group therapy sort of space for you to share the process, but also people that helps point you back to what I just talked about before, is that our sense of worth in God. I've been very blessed to be part of groups that have emotional intelligence. That's one thing I really look for. People that just won't invalidate what you feel with just biblical truth, but can support that with biblical truth. So I think that's something that's been really crucial on the tactical week-to-week experience of faith in my mental health journey.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
all of that. And I'll mention a profound insight that comes from the scientific and academic world that Dr. Thomas Insel recently wrote a book titled Healing.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes his decades of working in the psychological, academic, and psychiatric world and all the efforts that they've put in trying to resolve the mental health crisis. He came to the realization that for those who struggle with mental health, therapy and medication isn't enough. That for those who struggle, they need 3 P's: people, purpose, and place.
Ooh, okay.
And so people need a sense of belonging and community to really experience healing and recovery for their mental health journey. And my aha moment is, that sounds so much like church, or what church could be.
Correct.
Now, half of churches are somewhat anti-psychology and suspicious of its secular origins, but yet here we are on the internet, secular origins, so what? God can still use the things that general grace and people created the image of God create as useful tools for accomplishing his purpose. And so, hey, all truth is God's truth. We can use all of that for God's glory. And so psychology has been a tremendous help to me. And then the aha moment for me, as I've been in this process of developing Christian Asian mental health as a nonprofit ministry initiative of Asian American Christian Collaborative, that the church is the only place that gathers Asian Americans every single week. Sure, the Facebook group is available 24/7, but it's not the same as being in person and actually having the face-to-face or regular interaction you have with a community of people. And so there's something unique and powerful to have community if it's a safe place and people that can bleed for one another, be there for one another. And that's kind of the opportunity that I'm a part of, and a couple dozen other small ministries that are trying to figure out how do we bring the healing power of faith and community with the tools that modern medication and psychology has made available to us. So that's where we are in 2023, and it's wonderful to meet a fellow friend and like-minded person on that journey with us.
Yeah, I think, okay, even on the church front, yeah, I've been gravitating towards churches that are mental health aware. One, it's like a destigmatization of the mental health journey, that it's not like, oh, having a panic attack means you're crazy, or like you're outcasted, like a leper. You know, it's like that's like the worst. I think I can see churches treating people with mental health experiences as. And it's really powerful to see pastors that have gone through and shared their own experiences of depression and anxiety, just normalizing it. It's really helpful to see. Okay, let's talk about this. So I think Jesus and emotions, right? That's something there's not enough attention on. I think I've actually I've definitely read the Bible in which I've scanned for emotions. Here's the thing: God gets angry, God gets jealous, and we never really question that, right? But what does that mean when he gets angry and jealous, right? I think those are some emotions that are very stigmatized in our community, right? I think angry Asian dad is a trope. And I think we associate anger with outlash and outbursts, but God gets angry, but he doesn't just outburst, right? I think God is a very wrathful God. So how do we understand this in this godly context, right? Because Jesus flipped tables, you know. So
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept. Thank you. That's very famous.
Jesus was very anxious in the garden, as we talk about Holy Week.
Yeah. Philippians tells us to do not be anxious about everything, but by prayer and petition, present your requests to God, all that, right? So how do we make sense of our a negative or weighted and negative emotions in the biblical context, right? Pride is another factor of that with guys, right? And I'm trying to kind of figure that out as well. I'll give you my short spiel. I don't want to, but like I think in mental health, we talk about anger is a good thing. It is a signal that a boundary is being crossed. And God fumes with anger a lot of times when sin is committed. Sin is a crossing of God's boundaries that was given to us, His law, right? So it's supposed to be a practical, like, okay, I've learned, I've angered you, I'm going to do everything I can to not do that. Obviously, with us, in the human relationship and sanctification, it's going to be a process, right? But with people, it's like, yeah, if leaving the window open at night makes you angry, I'm just going to close the window. That's very easy, right? So it's supposed to help us learn what our boundaries are, and then we can create awareness of other people so they don't cross it. It creates a healthy interaction, right? I think that's what one of the takeaways. Jealousy, God is a jealous God. But one thing when I hear that, it's also what that means is God actually desires deep intimacy with us and wants all of us and not our attention to other gods, right? So it's kind of like a good thing in that context. And I think jealousy, when we experience jealousy, like, oh, I'm jealous of this person, what they have in their life, that could be construed as hey, that's something I want, but I probably believe that I can't achieve it or attain it. And that creates the whole bitterness, resentment, and like the negative feeling of envy and whatnot, right? So I imagine there can be like a practical, like using jealousy, like a teasing of like, oh, I think I want this, as a way to kind of help you figure out your direction in life, practically speaking, and having a faith and believing that if I put my resources and energy towards some of this, I can be reasonably close to achieving it, right? I think also pride is interesting because pride is talked about in a excessive amount where there's pride comes before the fall. There's hubris and arrogance. But also practically we think about pride as we need to take pride in what we do. And I think whether for male or females, it's like we all have a sense of worth, and like the world gives us a lot of signals that devalue our sense of worth based on our contexts, whether it's race, gender, and that's our worth meter. So having a healthy sense of pride is kind of getting to a healthy state, and anything in excess that becomes arrogance, right? So it's like having a good sense of self, but not being too full of yourself in some sense, right? So. Like, yeah, so even the pride is super stigmatized, but it's very healthy in certain contexts. So I think I'm saying this because in the Asian Christian diaspora, it's very easy for us to see negative emotions as black and white, but actually there's practicality in like dissecting all that a little bit as leaning into your emotions and kind of making sense of that. And not just being immediately like, oh, there's negative emotions in my head, I need to get rid of it, right? That's the biggest, like, I think that's one of the bigger, like, misunderstandings about depression and anxiety is that it's a bad thing, we need to get rid of it. And in actuality, it's just the signal, even from God at times, there's a misalignment between your value system and your external environment. And then you can go through your positive disintegration or, oh, be joyful when there's trials and tribulations. There's opportunity to grow. This is opportunity to grow. So yeah, that's my soapbox spiel about emotions and Jesus. So I think
there's so much more that we could dig into there. I think it's the frontier, the leading edge of where we are in 2023 and understanding how we're made in the image of God who is emotional. Whereas we have centuries of Christian teaching that has taught and said that God is not emotional because emotion indicates change and God never changes. But we're readjusting that lens on understanding who God is and who we are, and that emotions are actually a part of who we are, created in the image of God. And so emotion doesn't indicate change in nature or essence, but it is a change in how we're responding to our environment and situations. And there's a lot more going on and a lot more to unpack. And perhaps one of the first books to really begin digging into that is the series of books by Peter Scazzaro, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, and the whole trilogy of Emotionally Healthy, so on.
Love it.
And so on.
Love it.
And we're using the microphone from Neil Smith, who works with the team at Emotionally Healthy. church. And so I'll add a link in the show notes for those books. And then you mentioned a little bit earlier about getting out of bed.
Yeah.
And for those of us that go through a mental health challenge and struggle and recovery process, that becomes kind of the essential question is what's going to get us out of bed. And at this moment, as we're talking, there's a new book coming out by Alan Noble titled Getting Out of Bed, Christian Reflection and Meditation on Why We Persevere. It could be helpful to some. I think it's very challenging to others. So I wouldn't recommend to those who are experiencing severe mental illness, but for those who are in a sober place and have decent support and self-care, it adds a good theological and spiritual reflection on why we do get out of bed as a testimony of God's grace and goodness and strength. And so I've read a few reviews and excerpts on that. So that'll be in the show notes as well. And as we close, we'll do something that is popular in cyber culture, which is Ask Me Anything.
AMA.
As we're having this first meeting in person together, I'll open the invite to you. AMA, DJ Chuang to Bobby Deng. What would you like to ask me as we close out this episode? Because I think we have a lot more to talk about, but as we shared, I can tell you're very thoughtful, you're well-researched, you've wrestled through a lot in terms of finding your own path to health and wellness. I commend you on that. And you made the extra time and effort to come and visit with me, so I'm honored to be in your presence.
Yes. I'm actually honored to be in your presence. Man, just like the encyclopedia of like knowledge that you have of other people in the field and the advancement of our field in general, that's super valuable. I guess I'm trying to find a quick question, question that's like fun and mental health driven in the middle. So,
well, you can ask one of each.
How about this? My fun like way to kind of tie things together is like what are one of your like healthy and happy like ways to heal, process, or rejuvenate yourself, I guess. So like cope, you can think of it as coping, that's one way to think about it. Or but what are some of your like healthy ways that you kind of deal with anxiety and the monologue that you have in your head?
Yeah, it's something I have to be very conscious and intentional about, especially during times when I'm struggling. But over the past 5 years of my recovery process after my personal crisis in 2017, I've been able to go mostly autopilot, which has been nice, without having to work hard at it. But there are times when I have to work at it. So when I'm in autopilot, I'm sleeping 9 hours a night, plus a nap in the afternoon. I eat a basic diet of what I enjoy, so I'm not stressing out over a Mediterranean diet or having to be very careful with my nutrition. So I'm blessed to have decent health that I can just eat what I enjoy, but cut my portions down. And then the other piece that I need to stay intentional on as a regular rhythm of health and wellness is staying socially active. And so that happens through my church. I've been part of a support group for 2 years now. So that gives me a safe place to talk about my emotional journey that I don't have the opportunity to with my family. And I don't have enough time with my friends to meet every week. So what's nice about a support group, a peer-based support group, is having that regular place that you don't have to pay for, like I do with my therapist, which I also have as a safe place. So having safe places really helped me along my journey. But one thing I discovered yesterday on Good Friday that I want to make a part of my regular rhythm, not just on Good Friday, but perhaps monthly or even more frequently, is taking a day to unplug. And so I happened to stumble onto the idea of unplugging from content consumption. So just having a day of reflection. And so I took a walk around the neighborhood, 10,000 steps.
Love it.
Didn't consume podcasts like I do the other 364 days of the year. And I read 4 chapters out of Tim Keller's biography, and that was really reflective to see how God can work in the life of a person. I'm not a driven high achiever, but just to know how God can work in people is a good point of reference. And I'm a big Tim Keller fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love having conversations. And so that's one of my driving motivations to keep this podcast going every week.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a planner, so I'm kind of going week to week. Say, hey, who's got half an hour to talk? And then we talk. And so that keeps me going and energized.
Yeah, you know, sleep is very underrated. It does wonders. I wish there's more modeling of Jesus sleeping in the Bible. I'm sure The Chosen, there's probably some shots of like Jesus is napping, sleeping. That's like healthy too.
Yes.
All right. And then I love the nature walk, especially when you have this gorgeous view. It's just like being immersed in the Garden of Eden almost, jokingly, but it's gorgeous here. So I think immersed in nature. I think for me personally, my other last core value is beauty. I think you can see a lot of God's beauty and design and intention, right? I think, you know, it's even funny how in the Bible, God's like, you know, for the Ark of the Covenant, I want you to use cypress wood and, you know, juniper leaves. You're like, why is there so much detail? I want the meat. But I think when I read that now, I was like, oh, God values beauty. God values aesthetics so that He's glorified. And I think there's just a lot of joy that comes from that as well, experiencing God's beauty and design and nature. So yeah, I love that for you.
Thank you, Bobby. Great chatting with you. Appreciate hanging out with you.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear from you on erasingshame.com. We've got all our socials and handles. And we've recently moved to Spotify as a hosting platform, so you can actually add a reply and a comment on the Spotify app with what you think about this episode or what you think of our podcast or just what you're thinking or feeling. We'd love to hear from you and open the conversation with you through the magic of social media. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and subscribe to our email for updates. We would love to hear from you, so please add your comments at our website or on social. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast app, and you can also subscribe on YouTube or follow on Facebook. Please add a rating and review so we can reach more people with our message of health, hope, and compassion. This podcast is the digital outreach of Christian Asian mental health.